Mind the gap.
Welcome aboard, commuters. So this is part 2 of Build the Routemaster, part work by Hachette. Hachette, sorry, I stand corrected. Now, I've had problems so far. I've started subscribing and it's taking a while to come through. I finally received part 2. Unfortunately, they've messed up the order. I did start the subscription from issue 2. Obviously, I'd already bought issue 1. And when I saw 2 packages, I expected part 2 and part 3. Unfortunately, they sent me part 1 again and part 2. So I've continued with the build, starting with part 2, and I'm going to do a fortnightly release until I actually get a few backlog. I believe they're going to send me 4 issues every 4 weeks. So once I've got a little bit of a backlog, then I'll start releasing them weekly, which I anticipate will be roughly issue 4. It means that I will be behind some other people, but I don't think that's going to cause a problem in the long run. So laid out on the table, I have the parts that I've completed from issue 1. We've got the bonnet and we've got the grille. No, but I do like that little working part. You'll see some other equipment as well. I've got the spare screws that I've got from issue 1. I have actually lost a bag there. There was 2. I don't think I'll need them, but I'm keeping them just in case. There's also the screwdriver, which came with issue 1. Now, it has been recommended to me, and I will endorse this: buy yourself a new screwdriver. You see that just for me doing 1 issue, it's become worn. I will get a closer shot in a second. It's not very worn at the moment, but you can just see signs of wear. So it would be advisable to go out and buy, say for example, a spectacles repair kit, for example. That will give you a small screwdriver, or pop down to a proper like a builder's merchant or something and buy not necessarily a builder's merchant, but right, this is a jeweler's file. Part 2 does come with metal parts which you have to cut off. If you haven't got anything to cut them with, this is a set of metal cutters from Army Painter. It doesn't cut right down to the very edge, so you may need a little bit of gentle filing. It would be advisable not to buy plastic cutters. Metal will kill the plastic cutters. So there's the jeweler's file again. Another tip I've got for you is a piece of blue tack. Some of these screws are very, very, very small. And they're very fiddly, and they tend to sort of have a life of their own. So what I'll do, if it's difficult, sorry, I'm just going to wait for this bit to catch up. Right, so if we just get a little, you see that the screw's got a bit of a life of its own there. So all I'm going to do is just pop a little piece of blue tack into the top of the screw, and then the screwdriver will hold it. And then once we've actually inserted the screw, we can then just get a big blob of blue tack and just pull that little bit of blue tack out. You don't have to do this, I just find it a little bit easier. Okay, so on with the magazine. So we can see it's made up of 2 components. The first one is the magazine, and then we have the parts. So I'm just going to have a little look, make sure all the parts are in order, and obviously I'm going to cut the box open. Okay, so we have an article on St Paul's Cathedral. I do apologise about the view. I wanted to get the camera in close enough to actually build it. but in doing so I couldn't get all of the magazine. But the articles are interesting. There's one on Routemasters abroad. Nice shot there of a bus in South Transport livery. Does that count as abroad? I suppose it does. It's in Essex, isn't it? So another. It's only about a 4-page article. The rest of the magazine is essentially build instructions, and it finishes up with a nice poster. But it's a nice little magazine. Okay, so we have the magazine, and we'll just use the first part of the instructions. It should tell us everything that it contains. So we'll just give that a quick look over. Just make sure all the parts are in order. Now I like to line up all the parts that I need for that particular piece. And on this particular one, we find that we've got 2 pieces the same, but we only need 1. So what I'll actually do is I will pull both pieces out. I will compare the pieces, make sure they're not different. In this, I found a slight blemish in the ring. So what I've done is I've just made sure I position it so that the blemish is in the least, the hardest place to find, the place where you're least likely to see it. Now this particular ring went in fine. We just push that in, and what I've done is I've just got something blunt, preferably plastic, and I've just given that a little solid push in just to make sure it's in nice and flush. Now again, I'm just checking both of the pieces are the same. If they're not the same and you've put the wrong piece in, you will come a cropper later on. Both of these are the same. So we look at where we're going to line it all up. We're looking for any lugs. Just make sure it fits fine, and as you see, that one just drops straight in. Then we look at the headlamp glass. Again, we're making sure that they're both the same. You can see the detail on this is absolutely amazing. The little lines on the glass. Now obviously I know that those lines are going to go up and down and left and right. So obviously when we put the piece in, if they're going maybe at a diagonal, we know that we may possibly have got it wrong. There is a little lug to line it up with. There's the one on the I'm using the paintbrush just to point out where the lug is. I'm not actually painting anything. And then we're just checking the glass. And that one just pops in perfectly. Look at that, that's beautiful. Now as you see, these two parts, I've compared them, they do look very similar, but when you have a closer look you'll see that they're not the same. So you see where I'm waving my finger, I'm saying it's not the same. What you'll find is that on one side, on one of the pieces, the lugs are flat, and then on the other side, sorry, not the lugs, the screw holes, and on the other piece, the screw holes are actually at 90 degrees. Okay, so now we come to two pieces that do look very, very similar, but when you look, oops, just dropped that one. When you look, they're not the same. So now we're going to compare them in the magazine to see how they're different. So that one doesn't fit, and this one, it is a good fit, so we'll use that piece. Now this piece, we do have to be careful. There is a little groove in it. I'm going to point that out with the paintbrush. The reason for the groove is just going to pop it into the right place. So we look for the groove using the instructions, and we see where the groove lines up, and we just make sure that that goes over the groove. Okay, so now that's complete, we're going to put it to one side, and we're going to repeat the process. And it's pretty much exactly the same as the other side, and we're just going to make sure we check the bits. Obviously we know that these bits should fit, because where they were duplicates, we've now used one, that we're using literally the only piece left. So now we come to what I feel is the absolute worst part of the first two parts. We have these 5 strips that go along the bonnet. We've got some tiny screws. The screws have a life of their own. They just fly everywhere. In the process of making this, I've lost 5 screws. I managed to find 4 of them, but it took me 3 times longer to make this, put these 5 sections in, than it did to do the rest. This is the point where I discover that my metal clippers can't cut metal. So I'm very disappointed there. So yeah, have fun watching me try, and eventually I'll just give up. But what we want to do is, I resort to some other clippers in the end, much stronger ones. So I'm going to build, I'm going to put on just one of these strips, which in a moment I'll show you fast forward. It's essentially the majority of this video and the last video is just popping screws in. So, you know, you can watch a screw going in fast or slow, it doesn't make any difference. So I'm just going to pop one of the strips in, and then the end, it'll come to the end of this clip, and then I'll go on to the next clip. Obviously, you just install all of them the same way, but one word of advice, just I can't get my words out. So just install one strip, don't cut the second strip off until you've installed the first one, because if you cut all 5 of them, you're going to lose the order. I guarantee that you won't know which way round they're going. Okay, so here is the finished piece with the 5 strips. Be very careful, it's easy to rub the paint off. Like I say, it was an absolute nightmare, the parts are just so fiddly. So once you put them on, just put the first screw hole in and just tighten it just enough to hold it. Then put the other end, again just enough just to tighten it. Then put the 2 middle ones in. Don't screw them right down until you've got all 4 screws. And then what we're going to do now is we're just going to install the 2 parts that we've made onto the radiator grille. So here is part 2 complete. I'm very happy with it. Obviously from part 3 it starts to get full price. This is now the point where I want to bail out if I think it's not going to be worth it, because the parts are going to become quite costly. But I have to say I'm going to carry on. I mean, look at the size of this. This is absolutely amazing. Obviously when you watch something on a TV advert or on the internet, or even in print, you can't really appreciate the beauty of it. These are solid pieces. It's fun to make. It's a little break from my routine. Doing something is always nice, and yeah, I'm very happy.
Mind the gap.